Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Food Institute's webinar, How Grocers' Online Shopping Strategies Are Being Impacted by the COVID-19 Crisis. I'm Brian Choi, Managing Partner of the Food Institute, which has been serving the food industry with relevant, timely, and uninterrupted information for over 90 years. We're especially glad to be able to present this webinar today during a time when we know a lot of people are facing extreme uncertainty and challenges. We at the Food Institute remain committed to supporting the industry any way we can, and we will continue to publish our daily, weekly, and annual newsletters and reports, as well as host several webinars and seminars during the year to provide in-depth information and analysis in the food industry relevant topics. We have a few other webinars coming up on our schedule, including one on crisis management on April 20th and another on the CBD industry on April 28th. So please check out thefoodinstitute.com for more on our upcoming events. I'm pleased to be joined today by Bill Bishop, Chief Architect and co-founder at Brick Meets Click. Bill is recognized as one of the retail food industry's preeminent advisors, who's been involved in research and consulting for over several decades with a concentration on the new issues and developments impacting this business. He and his team provide thought leadership and support that help organizations successfully navigate the changing food retail landscape and leverage disruptive business information. I'm also happy to present David Bishop, partner at Brick Meets Click. David leads Brick Meets Click's consumer research, retailer benchmarking, and market forecasting programs, while also working closely with grocers to improve results flowing from their omni-channel strategies. He's also the author of 3A's growth framework and is utilized in modeling how markets will evolve and scoring how seamless shopping experiences are for various grocery retailers. Last but not least, we have Jack Record, CEO of ShopperKit. Jack and his team provide an e-commerce solution that gives grocers complete control over fulfilling online orders at scale, whether that's from physical stores, dark stores, MFCs, or centralized warehouses. ShopperKit also enables real-time customer communication for order substitutions and additions, as well as out-of-the-box integrations with other technologies for curbside pickup and third-party delivery management. A reminder that this webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the presentation slides and a link to the recording will be sent to all attendees following this event. There will also be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please submit any questions you have via the Q&A window on your screen at any point during the webinar. And now I will turn it over to David to get us started.
Great, thanks, Brian, and we appreciate the opportunity to share these insights with the Food Institute today. Let me first say that we realize that everyone's extremely busy dealing with urgent and critical issues today. So our goal today is to help others learn how the current health crisis is impacting grocers' e-commerce strategies, both today and likely tomorrow. So to accomplish that, when we talk about our 7 areas of interest today, I'm going to highlight key learnings from the most recent Shopper Insights. I'll throw some questions over to Jack, and he'll share both his and ShopperKit's perspective in terms of what they're seeing and hearing at retail, as well as their views on various issues. And then Bill will provide a broader view of the issues, helping us to bring into greater focus how these will ultimately impact or likely impact retail strategies going forward. Before we jump into those, into the first area, I just want everyone to understand where and how we derive these insights. So let me just hit on a few points that folks can probably see on the slide, but I just want to amplify. First of all, as we look at this, we're comparing our March 2020 wave to research that we completed about 6 months ago, actually in August of 2019. Both represent a national sample on a geographic basis, and we examine that based on, or I should say, we can dive down into different population densities. When we ask the households about their spending, it's focused specifically on grocery-related products. And that's really important. And when we mean grocery-related, we define that 2 ways for the person completing, the respondent completing the survey. One is items or categories commonly found in a conventional grocery store. And second of all, we give definitions of the various departments that you would commonly find or shop within the grocery store. So just to be clear, because I know various groups may define grocery in different ways. Our focus today is those who have purchased online within the past month from grocery delivery providers that offer either home delivery or some version of store pickup. while we do capture and monitor, and in fact, even in March, capture information about the ship to home segment, that's really less germane to this topic today. So we're excluding that, but wanted to just make sure that that was clear. So as we look at recency, we're focused primarily on those who said, yes, I purchased online from a grocery delivery or pickup provider within the last month. Those would most likely include mass merchants, club, online grocery delivery providers, folks like Fresh Direct, as well as both conventional and specialty grocers. So to be absolutely clear, Amazon Fresh is included within that subset, as is Whole Foods, which is delivered through Prime Now. In some places, we may break that out, but in aggregate, those would be included in that measure. So as we look specifically at past month, we asked those consumers who have used online to buy products online in the past month, where did they purchase? How many times have they made a purchase from there? And how they received those purchases. So again, in this case, it would be specifically related to the grocery and delivery. So that's important in the instance of mass merchants that also offer ship to home. We've excluded those for the purpose of this conversation today. And then lastly, when we look at the experience and the satisfaction, the likelihood to repeat, we're focused specifically on the most recent experience those consumers have had online in terms of how much did they spend, where did they spend it, how familiar they are with that service based on the past purchases over the last 3 months, and what's their intent to use that service again based on the most recent experience. So that's just the level set as we go into this. Now, this was an online survey, so we did weight based on internet usage. As we know, not all adults in the US are currently using the internet. And it's also weighted based on age, as we know that age is one of the predominant factors that are influencing the way consumers shop today. So with that, let's just jump into the first topic. I think there's been a lot reported on the surge that has come out of COVID-19. We've measured the increase to be about 192%, which, just to put in context, equates to roughly a 3-time jump on order volume just versus August of 2019. So a tremendous surge. And just for some additional context, at the time we completed the survey, which you can see at the bottom is between the 23rd and 25th of March, 19 states at that point had their various forms of stay-at-home orders in effect while we were surveying. That represented approximately 150 million people in the US, or approximately 46% of the population. Obviously, beyond those, we know that households could have been social distancing or practicing social distancing on their own, even if their states weren't there. But as we go forward, we would anticipate many of these numbers to continue to grow on an absolute basis, just simply because now we have about 96% of the US population currently under some form of stay-at-home order. But when we break that out by order volume by the two methods, again, pickup and delivery, and just to be clear, delivery in this case could include your first party or third party. So that would be, third party would be your Ship, your DoorDash, your Instacart, as well as first party, which would be retailer owned and operated. What you can see is pickup has reported stronger growth, which again is more of a function of the circumstances today. And we'll get into the order share. But the point is, as impressive as these gains are, whether we look at pickup and delivery individually or total order volume in aggregate, the fact remains the capacity pre-crisis really constrained how well grocers were able to meet this sudden spike in demand. And so we anticipate that these gains are understating the interest that consumer households have in using the shopping service. So with that, Jack, let me just kind of serve something up to you and ask, what are you seeing and hearing from retailers relative to how they're responding to this surge of online shopping today?
Sure. Thanks. And thanks for having me today. I want to make sure you can hear me okay, right, David?
Yep.
So like you said, there's a huge surge happening right now. Our customers are seeing 200% plus daily increases in revenue. We're seeing huge basket sizes, sometimes approaching as much as $700 per order. There's just record-setting single-day revenues. The change that the grocers are going through today and how they react to this is really more around communication than anything else. In the past, it was a highly focused on a personalized approach to fulfillment, kind of bringing the online guest into the store while their order is being fulfilled. That's more or less changed to a more utilitarian approach today, leveraging things like automated texting. So, for example, when an order is placed and gets sent to the store, an automated text comes back to the online guest saying, "We received your order. By the way, we may be out of stock on things. We may have substitutions. We're going to honor the substitutions as best we can, but we're not going to be communicating with you in real time as you may have expected in the past." And this is really just a function of the fact that they're running and gunning inside the stores. They're being overloaded, and they just don't have time to really sit down and talk to the guests. So, and it's a gated type of functionality where, for example, they use geolocation services at most of our customers as well through places like Radius. And a text actually gets sent to the guest as they're pulling into the parking lot, kind of outlining what a contactless pickup looks like. Same thing on delivery. When the delivery when the order is actually staged, another automated text will go out saying, "Your order will be delivered at XYZ. This is what contactless drop off looks like. Please don't come out to meet. We'll drop the bags off outside of your door and we will leave." And then obviously when the driver leaves, another automated text gets put out saying that the bags are there for you to pick up. So it's less of a personalized approach and it's much more focused on kind of rising to meet the demand. And the grocers that have those kind of technologies to automate those things and to brand them, these are all marketing driven messages, are best positioned to kind of deal with this.
Gotcha.
Well, picking up on that, it is about communications, and my job is to talk a little bit broadly about this. And I guess I thought about the importance of communications in terms of the last time I was waiting for something and how reassuring it was when people regularly communicated versus waiting to tell me something when a development was
Sure, yeah.
So I think just keep that in mind, that we're all in the same boat when it comes to that. Building a little bit on what Jack has said, I think we do have an issue from the beginning of overcoming negative experiences. And one of the ways to do that we're seeing people do it right now is to work on both setting and then meeting expectations. Obviously, the world is different. Everybody understands that. So you've got to update the expectations on the information on your website and obviously update the way you execute against that. But communicating that, helping people understand that, I don't think anybody's cutting anyone a lot of slack today, but I do think they understand, particularly when the communications comes their way. David?
Excellent. So, one aspect or one function that is primarily driving that surge in volume that we've found is obviously household penetration. And again, we have seen an incredible spike in increase. You can see here 146% relative to just about 6 months ago when we last put this survey in the field in August. So just put that in perspective. In August of 2019, we had 13% of all U.S. households who indicated that they had ordered online for either delivery or pickup within the last 30 days. Now, as of March 2020, that's 31%. So we've gone from 16 million households to 47 million households. And that is incredible, nothing that anyone would have anticipated. And when we look at our forecasting models, which we use this as an input for, we recognize that there are a few factors that really trigger adoption and diffusion of online grocery shopping. One is really positive word of mouth or a recommendation from someone we know and trust and respect. And the second is a life-changing event, something like getting married, having a baby, or coping with a health issue. Well, today what we're dealing with is a life-changing event that affects us all, and especially those most at risk. And that helps explain why, if we look at the age cohort over 60, they're the fastest growing age group that is showing interest in usage of online grocery shopping. So, with the influx of so many first-time customers, Jack, are there things that retailers are doing or should be doing or doing in the future to onboard them, or are they just putting out fires trying to meet today's demand?
Well, so in online grocery specifically, it's always been kind of a first in wins type of game. I've got several CEOs of grocers who've come to me and said that it's actually harder to lose an online guest than it is a brick and mortar guest. That's generally after about the third shop. So once they've kind of hit their rhythm and they've done 3 online shops, it's actually easier to keep an online guest than it is a person who's been coming to your store for years and years. So it's always been about the initial online experience and earning their trust and business. That continues here, especially with people who are maybe a little less technology driven, kind of the older generation. But high visibility, high levels of communication. My grandparents who are in their 90s are now ordering groceries online because they didn't before. They didn't before COVID. They were still very much going to the stores as much as they could. But now that they see that it's available, they're happy with the results. And I think what you're going to see is more or less a paradigm shift in grocery. It's going to be accelerated. The things that we kind of projected over the last 5 years are going to happen over the next 6 months, and it's probably not going to go back to the way it was before. There's going to be a leftover percentage of people who are, since they're now comfortable with online grocery, they'll continue to shop there. The difference during the crisis that we're experiencing today is that it's less of a brand extension. Most grocers realize that their most valuable asset is their brand, and they want to really focus on that during the online shopping experience to differentiate themselves. Right now, it's more or less it's kind of an emergency situation. It's like, we're going to serve you as best as we can, do everything we can to help you, but don't always judge us on this one experience, because we've got another 200 orders right behind yours.
So that brings us to maybe the most positive aspect of this is, listening to the numbers that David shared, there are 20 to 25 million people who have just recently started to shop online that weren't there before. Now, what's significant about that is that I think the hardest thing of shifting from being a non-online grocery shopper to becoming one is the very first order. It always gets easier on the second or the third order. So we have a large number of people who've gotten over that first hurdle, but at the same time, and Jack's referred to this, habit has not yet been established. So I think at this stage of the game, what we want to do is to be sure that we work hard at winning that business, recognizing that the loyalties haven't been established. We haven't locked into the situation yet that Jack described, but we soon will. So this is a time to compete in a very positive way for that business, because it will lead to an increase in sales.
Great.
David?
Yeah. So, just a minute ago, we talked about the percentage change in order volume in aggregate and by fulfillment method. I think, what's impressive here is that pickups acceleration and growth versus delivery is even more impressive when you realize it's coming off a larger base of orders. This is looking at, again, August 2019 versus 2020, and even pre-crisis, pickup was the dominant method on an order share basis, representing 56%. It's gained even more. Now, I want to be really clear, because we had talked about this before the webinar. We're not suggesting that pickup's going to continue this gain in share in perpetuity, because ultimately that's going to come down to the customer in terms of how they evaluate which fulfillment method makes the most sense for them. So things like availability of time slots, the product choice that they can select from, as well as the cost to use, are all going to be elements of that. That hasn't changed. But what we're seeing clearly is increased use as a result of the current circumstances. Now, we're highlighting this because in the Brick Meets Click e-grocery benchmarking program, which we recently did in the summer of 2019 as well, that had 28 banners providing store-level e-POS data, we know that approximately 2/3 of the grocery stores, not banners, but grocery stores, offer both fulfillment methods, delivery and pickup. But we know that the other third are only offering one. So if you're a retailer who's only offering one, clearly there's a large part of the market that you're not serving. What we also know from both this shopper research as well as our retail benchmarking work is that customers have very strong preferences relative to what fulfillment method they're attracted to, and there's very little cross-shop relative to delivery and pickup. So it's clear that grocers need to offer both methods and not to lose the customers to their competition. So Jack, what else would you say grocers need to consider when they're evaluating how to support both fulfillment methods, especially today with the COVID crisis?
Yeah, I think owning your fulfillment process is the key here. We've seen a huge transition in pickup in the last year in terms of the time spent in the parking lot. That's just newer technologies, geolocation services, things like that. So we're seeing sub 3-minute pickup times in the parking lot. And I think now that people, if you were getting a delivery before, you probably had this idea in your mind that a pickup was going to be a kind of a painful experience, that it's going to take 10 minutes plus. But now that they're starting to do that out of necessity, people are going to start moving more and more towards pickup because they realize how seamless that process really is. And the majority of Americans pass their grocery store on an average of 2.5 times a day, and they control that pickup. There's still a delivery window that you have to be home for, so it's a little bit more flexible. But in this vein, when we really come down to owning your fulfillment process, grocers are extremely limited in their ability to flex or pivot if they don't take that control. And this was something that's been going on since Amazon bought Whole Foods, since Walmart really hit the gas pedal in the grocery market. Everybody in the space kind of realized that, listen, if a fifth of my business is going to come from the online world, then I need to take control of that process and to extend my brand, to protect my brand, to reduce cost, and ultimately to increase profitability. Owning how this whole process works is the secret to profitability there. Now, all of those things are accelerated, and there's a new dimension, which is safety. So we're now actually getting into conversations with grocers that are actually closing large swaths of stores. They're saying, no, these are only delivery and pickup stores. We don't want customers coming in. And the reason for that is safety. They want fewer people in the stores. They want to limit it to employees. To avoid things like contamination, to protect both the employee as well as the guest. When you take control, when you own your fulfillment process, you're in a position to do that. So the delivery and pickup piece, I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see it as the crisis unfolds, how those numbers come out. But my personal thinking is that anybody who hadn't tried pickup before, who has a great experience, is probably going to continue down that path after the crisis, because it really has come a long, long way in a short period of time. It's more flexible and there's more control there. And it's also, again, a safety issue too. There's nobody coming to my house or anything like that. It's just an easier way to go.
Okay. We're going to go to the next slide. So, we talked about this increased interest in usage and trial, and that's great news. The realities are obviously starkly different today. And many people are asking, out there, how's this increased interest going to impact the business going forward? And there's no question there's going to be an uptick. The real question for retailers and everyone out there is, what does that magnitude look like? Obviously, we have to make a lot of decisions that require a lot of investment of resources going forward to support this. So it's a very important question, but it's really too early to get a handle on that. But what we can see here on the overall aggregate on the repeat intent, which is looking at the most recent order that you completed for delivery or pickup, the likelihood that you're going to use that same service again has dropped from 74% in August to 43% today. Now, that seems dramatic, and it is. The reality is, even at 43%, if that's all that ended up sticking with the service, you would still see a sizable gain in the number of new customers that would continue to use the service. But it is clear that the current crisis is dramatically dampening that likelihood to place another order, but it's not suggesting that the person is making a kind of a two-dimensional decision between online and offline. What this means is, and it's understandable from the customer point of view, that is, if I go online today and I can't buy what I want, or I order what I think I'm going to get and then I get something different or nothing at all, or I can't get the order as quickly as I thought, or even get a slot. All those are obviously a reflection of the circumstances today. But the reality is customers are demanding, unforgiving, and unrelenting. So even during times like this, they're not going to necessarily cut the retailers as much slack as we would think. So while the repeat rate has dropped dramatically, what we're simply going to see is that interest shift, and we're going to talk about this in a second, to potentially other providers. So while we are addressing the immediate need, the urgent need of trying to address as much of this demand in the near term as possible, the reality is we only have so many times to make a first impression. And these customers may not give us a second chance because today is very stressful for them, and what they're simply looking for are solutions that they consider acceptable for their livelihoods. Oh, check. So I'm sorry, I impressed myself with that ending there. What are you seeing retailers do to try to overcome some of these challenges? Again, we know that they're putting out fires and focused on today, but what are some of the things that they may be thinking about or talking about today that they realize they need to address sooner or later in order to capture more than their fair share of this incremental interest?
Yeah, there's definitely been a kind of a sea change in the way that grocers think today. There was a time, and it wasn't too long ago, where there was still some debate over the validity of online grocery. Will the American shopper allow their kids' lunchbox meats and produce come from an online order? People don't care about books or shoes, but we're funny about food. So grocers are realizing that, especially now with the crisis we're going through now, the uptick is huge. And the reality is that they want to take control of the relationship with their guest. It's important for them. The reason people shop in grocery stores is because of that grocer's brand. And the reason that people shop with grocers online should be the exact same reason. It should be their brand. So the focus now is actually figuring out a way to virtually bring the guest inside the store so they feel like they have a concierge type of service. They have an advocate. We're getting back to a time where people know their butcher and who's picking their produce for them because they're communicating with these people. Things like out of stocks and fill rates, if there's any frustration there, those are growing pains for the industry as a whole. We're actually starting to now get into some pretty deep end of the supply chain pool where things like hub and spoke functionality, where grocers are actually partially fulfilling orders from their warehouses, or for example, during the COVID crisis, we're seeing fulfillment from other stores, maybe lower volume stores are actually they're taking on some of the heavy lifting to fulfill orders. That hub and spoke functionality allows grocers to kind of maximize their entire existing natural distribution network, which is their stores, as well as their supply chain network and things like warehouses and distributors, or even getting into things like endless aisles with distributors. So if an item that was ordered online isn't available in a store through the fulfillment platform, we can actually have it alert the distributor and have it drop shipped to the guest. So those kind of, where they stub their toe on things like out of stocks are getting better every single quarter. I think the experience is going to mimic, probably be even better than actually walking into the store here within the next 6 to 12 months, because as a guest walking into the store, if you're out of an item, you're out of an item. But as a guest ordering something online, when I have access to your entire supply chain, there's a much higher probability of that item being fulfilled and getting to me as quickly as possible.
So looking at this from the standpoint of demonstrating that you're open for business and you want that new business, I think the headline is actions speak louder than words. So sure. Complementing some of the other points that have been made, I think it's important to demonstrate that you are interested as a retailer in better serving the customer in the future. You're making changes right now to make that happen. You're providing times set aside for individuals who need a little additional time. You might be reserving slots for customers who have unique needs. But in each of these cases, you're communicating your desire to welcome and want to serve customers by virtue of your actions Obviously, you can talk about that too, but I think it is the action that speaks loudest. David?
Yeah. And just one last thing, even if the retailer's hitting on all cylinders, doing everything right, there is a subset of customers today that when they have the opportunity to choose between in-store shopping and online, their preference is in-store for a variety of reasons. So it's just the realities that some of these customers are here because of the circumstances that they're under and will return to the store. And it's no fault of the retailer's performance.
So it's absolutely about the retailer offering the
Yeah.
customer what they want to buy, when they and where they want to buy it. It's all the above, right? That's
Right.
the grocer of the future is going to be able to support their. So even when guests order online today, they're still going into the store on an average of 2 times more a week. They generally do their large shop once, and then they'll still stop into the store for fresh stuff. So there's nobody's saying that the store itself is going away. It's just giving the customer what they need when they need it. And to do that, you've really got to think about this at an enterprise level, both from a supply chain and then, Bill, as you said, from a relationship perspective. You've got to be able to treat your guests the same way online as you would when they walk into your store. And the technology that we have allows us to do that. Everybody's got a smartphone in their pocket. Everybody can text. Everybody can accept a picture. If you get a note from your butcher saying, hey, those ribeyes that you like are in stock, should I add them to your order? It's very easy for you to answer that. It's different than a phone call or an email or something. It doesn't feel like marketing. It's a very natural way to increase basket size and again, solidify the relationship between the store and the online guest.
All right. So obviously we're borrowing from some of our benchmarking work from the summer pre-COVID crisis, but this is based on, EPOS data from those 28 store banners. And obviously everyone knows, and a lot of discussions around the topic of retention. However, we recognize retention is a tricky metric for grocers because it's really used for membership and subscription business models. So we prefer to look at monthly active users, just looking at the way households typically would shop, whether it's online or offline. And obviously we're seeing that that first month that a customer comes online to a service, and again, this is pre-crisis, their average spend is about $150. Now, again, that's a function of the average order value as well as the number of orders they place each month. So, the idea of keeping a customer active, again, assuming that this is the way that they view as an acceptable alternative going forward, the chart speaks volumes. You can see by the third month, they're spending in aggregate nearly twice as much as the first month. So as we look at this crisis and see the opportunity coming out of the crisis, the cost to acquire these customers is extremely low. So the upside potential of keeping any number of the incremental customers is extremely high. So these aren't normal times. It's clear that there continues to be a significant upside. We don't know exactly what that is, but we also know it's not only an upside in sales, but a profit, because the profit mix shifts and improves as these customers become to rely on and trust those grocers to deliver all the groceries that they're looking for, both packaged and fresh. So, Jack, you may have just touched on some of these things. So if you did, just let me know. But how are retailers strengthening that onboarding, and how can they help keep more of them coming back, recognizing some are going to go back to the store after the crisis?
Yeah, so let's take it from the crisis perspective first. What we're seeing today is a lot of grocers are waiving fees and subscriptions. They're actually not charging for the online shop, and the reason for this is interesting. They're doing this out of the idea of safety. They really don't want people coming into their stores. As much as they can limit that, they will. They again, contamination and things of that nature. It's the same reason they're actually closing stores and just basically turning them into online fulfillment centers. It's safety. Now, the idea is that this hopefully translates into future business down the line, because you're opening the floodgates to allow online guests to start using your service. So from a tactical standpoint, we're kind of taking the hit on the subscription or the order fee to get everybody through the crisis. Again, there's some benefit to the grocer here, because now we've got a whole new generation of people, and not a generation from an age perspective, just a whole new secondary wave of people doing online shopping that have accelerated their usage, who are now getting this experience So from a tactical perspective, we go open those doors and taking a little bit of a cost hit with the idea that from a strategic perspective, we're going to keep those customers on down the line into the future. And even grocers are doing some interesting things outside of things like waiving subscription fees and order fees. They're even changing the way they slot. Historically, they would probably do a week or 2 week slotting, so scheduling, opening up windows for delivery or pickup. It's like adding a lane to a highway. It fills with traffic. They've taken the idea now that we're just going to slot on a day-to-day basis, maybe today and maybe tomorrow, and that's about as far as it goes, because what was happening was people were hoarding these slots. So they really finely tuned these slottings in large part to protect some of their most vulnerable customers, the people who just can't get out of the house. And that's a piece of the puzzle that's always been there. A large part of online grocery have been the elderly and government homes, public housing, stuff like that. So it's a situation where they have the power now to get much more detailed about their slotting and get more finely grained in who gets what when. So I think that'll change after the crisis, but it just goes to show you that the people who have invested in online grocery over the past couple, 3 years they're head and shoulders better than the competition in being able to react and control how do they want to move forward.
So shifting to directly to a merchandising opportunity related to all of this, I was talking recently with a category manager who had joined this retailer from a completely different situation. And one of the things he was amazed with is how little the retailer he was working with was doing in terms of cross-category selling. In other words, there really wasn't that much going outside the lanes in terms of the category manager to expand the size of the basket. On the other hand, you can see how the sales are increasing, and I'm only guessing that a lot of this is attributable to more cross-category selling, more solution selling. And what's interesting from a consumer point of view, as David's research has shown, this is saving time and, frankly, reducing stress for the shopper while it's increasing sales for the retailer. So if you're not banging away on cross-category selling or solution selling, this is a really good thing to do simultaneous with the things that David and Jack have said.
Yeah, it's definitely that concierge type of service as well. It's looking at your basket and understanding what you've purchased and saying, hey, you've got buns and you've got hot dogs and hamburgers. I don't see any ketchup or cheese or things like that. It's like having someone in the store looking at your shopping list and helping you along with that. And there's a future in that from a nutrition perspective, from a lot of other areas, prepared items, prepared foods. They're all in the future. Probably not germane to the COVID conversation, but looking at basket and doing things like intelligent substitutions and AI-driven additions is all on the table today.
Yeah. So, just jumping to the next slide here, we talked about repeat intent in aggregate. Here we've broken out some of the subsets that fall within that aggregate that we shared a minute ago. And, as the headline says, everybody's customer is in play right now. The reality is simply no one was fully prepared for this level of demand, period. However, how retailers respond today and tomorrow are going to determine how much they gain coming out of the crisis. That's clear to us. So while it's important to take care of the urgent needs of today, it's equally important for them to think about how they can sustain these levels going forward while keeping as many of these new customers active. So the point we touched on a minute ago was, the circumstances are driving customers to lower repeat rates. But again, it's not simply they're going to stop shopping online. The reality won't allow that. So we're going to find demand shifting to other retailers as customers search for what they consider an acceptable alternative. And obviously, timing and luck are going to play a part of that. But Jack, what are some of the examples, if you have any, that you're seeing or hearing about that retailers are employing today to take care of, supporting their customers.
Yeah, this is very much about trust and service. Bill and I talk about this all the time. It's if you have an online experience, a customer who shopped at your store and they don't like your online experience, there's a huge problem there because your brand is not being extended. You're not giving them the same level of service or assortment or whatever in the online world. The key to grocery in particular is that personal touch. It's creating a relationship. I get into a lot of conversations with grocers who want to kind of commoditize this experience and maybe automate it or pull it from different areas. And I think that's a slippery slope. I think that's a battlefield that the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world want to play on. If they had their druthers, they would be delivering groceries from a warehouse down by the airport, and you would get what you get, and you really wouldn't be a part of the conversation of the shop. That's a dangerous game to play for grocers in a world where an apple that comes from a gas station is viewed very differently than an apple that comes from, say, one of the best grocers in the country. Even though it's the same apple, particularly in America, we have a very different view of that piece of fruit because of where it comes from. That needs to be extended during the online shopping experience. So if you're seeing drop-offs in any kind of online shopping, it's because your brand is not being translated to your online guests. And the way to translate that is to bring them into the store, make them feel like they're part of the shop, make sure that the substitutions that they have are well known and well thought out and they're okay with it. Developing a relationship, it's a familial type approach. And this is a complete company enterprise type of goal. It's a marketing, text-based branded marketing, how we talk to customers, when to upsell, how to speak to different customers, segmenting your customers. There's a whole CRM aspect to this. And on the backside, there's a whole supply chain and operational aspect to this as well to make sure that we're actually delivering on the things that we're promising. So this is big league e-commerce. It's not a situation where we've got a piece of paper that's printing out in a store and we're going to pick a few orders. This is engaging your customer, and again, grocery is about the hearts and minds of the people. We care so much about food that you have to rise to the occasion to do it. Now, COVID throws a little bit of a curveball at that because again, it becomes a much more run and gun utilitarian. We're just trying to get it out the door. My personal feeling is that the people are going to appreciate it. Whereas a guest who used to maybe complain about the ripeness of the banana in the past, it probably is now very just happy just to get a banana, right? People are sitting at home saying, I'm just glad I got 95% of what I need. That's not the long-term solution, but I think the grocers who are meeting that demand today and setting the expectations, it's a lot about how you walk through the fire. So if you walk through the fire well today and you get trust and service with your online guest, they're going to remember that, and they're going to keep coming back in the future.
Jack, you make a really good point. This is a wake-up call for everyone. You can see from this slide, everybody's got to raise their game. Maybe a way to say this is it's time for everybody to play by the big boy rules, not the other set of rules. So I saw something that made me focus on this subject very intently, and it said something like this: what the customer bought from you isn't necessarily what they wanted. It's what they were able to order after they looked at what you had to sell. Mm-hmm. So what that says to me is that this big boy rule thing involves a rotation from selling products to really winning the hearts and minds of customers by understanding them intimately and going a little bit deeper. Sure. Some of the very, very sharpest merchants in this space today are using other sources of information to help them get there. David?
Yeah. So to kind of finish up on our final topic before we flip it back to Brian for Q&A, as I know there's a bunch of questions coming in, is, we know the discussion around profitability is only intensifying today. Is simply more sales that grocers are capturing or shifting online. There's many dimensions to the topic, include how do we increase average order value, reduce the cost to serve, mitigate the negative impact on the in-store shopping experience. We wanted to just illustrate an example, which was an independent analysis that we did last year of one solution that is helping a retailer build both the top line sales and reduce the cost to serve, which both are contributing factors to boosting their overall profitability with improvements in efficiencies and the effectiveness of selling. So, clearly there are other solutions out there, Jack. This one is a near term, can be implemented very quickly, relatively low risk, high reward. But can you provide your thoughts on how retailers can consider other incremental improvements that will help boost the overall profitability of conducting commerce this way?
Sure. Yeah. It takes a holistic approach. All right. So it's the key to profitability in online grocery is to reduce labor costs, because essentially you're paying to do something that your customer used to do for you, which is pick their order. So you've got to reduce the labor costs through things like multi-order, zone picking, optimized pick path, prepared items, things of that nature, while simultaneously increasing basket size. That's the calculus. Reduce cost, increase basket size as best you can. We live in a world where that's certainly possible through things like texting. We see basket size increase. In fact, we see basket size increase when it's not even intended. When a substitution comes in, we'll send a text, or the employee in the store will send a text saying, we're out of Folgers Original Coffee. Would you like light roast or dark roast? And the customer will reply and say, light roast or dark roast, or don't worry about it, we'll get it next time. Number one, we've solved a fairly painful substitution challenge in an elegant way. But what tends to happen more times than not is that customer, now realizing they've got an agent inside the store that's looking out for them, sends another text saying, hey, I forgot paper towels, or the baby needs diapers or food. So just having that communication platform is very important from a basket size growth. In terms of grocer future recommendations and how to, once we're past this tight part of the crisis right now, it's very much about maximizing the tools that you have today. It's doing what you're good at. You've got a natural distribution center of stores, maximize them. I get into conversations that get fairly esoteric around dark stores and MFCs and automation and things like that. And I think there's places for that for sure. But until you're doing 100+ orders a day from your local stores, or maybe even 150 orders a day, you're really not maximizing the chips that you have on the table. And then again, hub and spoke, once we get to 100, 150 orders a day per store, we can still leverage our warehouses or other dark stores. You've got a lot of runway with the existing pieces of infrastructure that you have on the table today. The secret is to maximize that and then kind of take a look and say, okay, what's the future beyond that? But I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel or really get into some crazy new technologies, especially if they're on the supply chain side of the world. Amazon and Walmart have forgotten more about that than we're ever going to know. That's not the battlefield we want to play on. We want to play in our stores with our people, with our brand, and make our online guests feel as though they're part of this process. And that's something that we're seeing with our customers. It's very, very successful once they kind of grasp the idea that, yeah, we need to have a bag out in 3 minutes and get the customer out of the parking lot. And yes, our delivery needs to be on time, and we leverage with the gig economy so that, those guys can actually handle the heavy lifting of delivery. It's using the technology pieces that are available to us. Bill, you and I talk about that all the time as well. It's this holistic view to solving the challenge for the online guest.
Jack, you're absolutely right. And while you've done a really I think, thorough job of both current and future relative to supply chain flexibility and sort of staying in the lane where it's going to be most profitable as you grow. I just want to finish my remarks here with a statement that it's never been more important than today to get the pricing right. We haven't touched on pricing, but clearly there's a lot of philosophy in this area. But bottom line, in the same way you've got to worry about sales increases and reducing cost to serve, you can't afford to waste even a penny of markdown dollars. So what does this mean? I think at absolute minimum, it means avoiding any instance where you're in a tricky price match situation where you may be giving away those markdown dollars for no really good reason other than the fact that sort of a macho approach. And it also means finding ways to be sure that when the customers use a more expensive service, you, that is, as the retailer, are compensated for that service. Now, I'm using pricing in a very broad sense here, and we don't have time really to get into the details of it. But I think as you reflect on it, you'll see what I'm thinking about here in terms of whether it be in fee or whether it be in markup or some combination thereof.
Sure.
Dave, back to you.
Yeah. So let me flip it back to Brian to open it up to some Q&A. So back to you, Brian.
Great. So thank you, everyone. Very informative. The slides were great. We have a lot of good questions from the attendees. I have one question from Michelle, and I don't know who would be the right person to answer this, but it's she's asking for the survey. Were you able to further categorize how people shop online for themselves or for relatives, especially the non-web savvy seniors? For example, how someone in New York would place online orders for the parents in LA. This is one idea how to extend the concept of elderly care and remote assistance during this difficult time.
Yeah, Brian, that's a great question. I, in fact, did that with my mother. I did a video, encouraged people to go see it. I wrote a blog on it. And it's kind of comical because there were about 10 speed bumps within that if I weren't there guiding her, she would have abandoned the process and just cursed at the screen and ultimately called me to shop for her. So I think this is an element of the customer care that is really unique in terms of how can retailers use their grassroots community support and activism within their own community network to help build the onboarding process in a very organic way. So in the case of family members helping other family members, that's a great natural process. I think grocers should only promote and facilitate that even further because we don't have enough phone lines and people to man the support center to do that. But I think especially for the older consumers out there who may not have a mobile phone. My mother says she doesn't have a mobile phone. Guess what? She does. She just never turns it on. Mm-hmm. So I have to get the text notifications when her delivery is coming, and then I call her. It's not perfect, but it works for her. She is one of those few people. Once she can say it's all clear and safe for an older person to go back to the store, she's headed back because that's her social time. She likes to talk with people in the store. She knows what she wants to get. So she's using online in temporarily to get her needs, but she wouldn't have been able to do it without help. I was lucky enough to be there to do that, but there's a lot of other older consumers who aren't. So we need as an industry to encourage others to lend a helping hand, so to speak, to help onboard those seniors. Great question.
Great. We have another question from Julie, and she's asking, are you seeing shoppers buying in-store from one retailer, online from others during or before COVID?
Jack, I don't know if you have any observations on that. I wouldn't say we've seen a significant difference there. Obviously, every market's going to be different. Oh, Bill? Bill just raised his hand.
I think what I'd suggest is that the whole notion of omnichannel, and the data shows us that the most serious shoppers with a retailer shop both online and in store. And that tells me basically that in the same way consolidation has taken place in a lot of aspects of the business, the consolidation of spending on the part of a household is going to gradually or perhaps rapidly concentrate more in one store than another. It doesn't mean we didn't occasionally see reaching out maybe to a club for something, but shopping routinely for the supermarket. But I think over time, the familiarity with the store and the experience improvements we've been talking about here combine to drive a person to the same place.
Got it.
Yeah. I think that there are great online grocers out there. I think there are grocers that are doing this exceedingly well, and I think that people know that. I think if you're not delivering, you're going to see more people in your store than you're online. I think if you are delivering in the e-grocery space, that swells. Month over month, quarter over quarter, it continues to grow.
Okay. Our next question is from Steven. And he's asking, can you describe again the difference between home delivery and ship to home, as well as some concrete examples from the top players?
Yeah, so we'll do it in lay speak here. I go online, I go to Amazon.com. Actually, this would be my mother. She wants her, what kind of cookies are they? Soft bread? Berry Lou. And so she has her favorite. She can't find anywhere. It's easier and quicker for her to go there versus drive around the state of Illinois and try to find them. So she finds those on Amazon or wherever. She clicks buy, and it gets shipped to her via what we call common carrier, which would be a FedEx, UPS, Postal Service, or a contract carrier. So that most often it would be a Amazon Flex driver. These would be orders that come through. It could be 2-day, it could be same day, it could be next day, but they're generally left unattended outside, and you get an alert when it's there. Home delivery examples would be Fresh Direct, Peapod, although Peapod is a little bit different because from the customer standpoint, they may not associate Peapod like they do with Fresh Direct because Peapod's associate with physical grocers. So they may not really see the distinction. But a Fresh Direct that doesn't have a physical presence with stores, that would be home delivery. Generally, before pre-COVID, it was attended delivery, meaning you had to kind of pass it over to the person. They had to be there. Now we're into the contactless or the unattended delivery world. So those would be examples. And then again, pickup would be any one of those places, would be curbside. It could be in-store or it could be drive up. Yes, Bill.
So as you're talking about delivery, you elaborated on Peapod, very good point, but it would also be every supermarket, every specialty store as well. So anybody that you're shopping routinely and the delivery is probably coming from the store, whatever your complete grocery order is.
So take Hannaford Brothers, which now is expanded into delivery. That would be what we consider a first party. They own and operate the delivery phase of the fulfillment. Third party would be I order from Jewel for 1 or 2 hour and I get it from Instacart. Yes.
So the way I'd like to think about this difference is if I'm going to do a complete shop, I'm going to have a pickup or delivery. If I'm looking for selected items, I'm probably going to order it and have it shipped to home.
Yeah, and that's why we affectionately refer to the pure play single item as the spearfishing occasion, and then the basket bandit being for all the fresh and packaged goods you would typically get at your local grocery store.
Okay, great. And our next question, we have a great question from Julie again. What would you recommend retailers to do to overcome the poor experience some shoppers had with their first online orders? Free delivery, free products, coupons?
All the above. I think the personal touch, it could be, and this is not efficiency, but, actually calling them or sending them an email with a personal touch, recognizing the challenges we're all facing. We're all in the same boat, but, not forgetting that it's some of the basics, right? Using a person's name is a big thing. We saw that in social media. So the same thing goes here. While we're overwhelmed with fighting fires, the retailers who are always going to win are the progressive ones, and those who are always relentlessly focused on delivering against the customer expectations. So it's not going to be easy. There's not one solution. We're seeing a lot of different ones out there. But I would say, throw everything against the wall to try to keep as many of these customers engaged, because we know the longer you keep them, the less likely they are to consider an alternative, because the thing that changes behavior is disruption and dissatisfaction. And the reason why some people came online is because they can't go to the store.
Yeah, I echo that. I would say to make sure you're doing it right, though, as well. I think, if you had problems before, it's an opportunity to go back and say, where were our shortcomings? Now that we're focused on this, how do we fix it? Let's implement the processes and technologies that are required to really do this the right way, and then get it through word of mouth. New people will come, the experience will be great, and it will grow. So I don't know that you need the mea culpa as much to, apologize for your past failures. Almost let that go. Do it right now going forward. Do it the best you can, and the world will follow you, I think. Obviously, it depends on specific situations. If you really had a catastrophe, then it may be a different strategy. But making sure you're doing it well now is the first step in making the future more solid.
The only thing I'd add to that is if you can personalize it to a degree, whether it's making good or making good and doing better, and let the name and the individual on the other end know it's for them. it'll make all the difference in the world.
Got it. And we'll just have one more question. This would be a yes or no question, and this is for all of you. Interesting question from Michael. So he's saying the Amazon game changer, the strategic USA partner for Alibaba in the next 12 to 18 months. Yes or no, Bill?
I just want to be sure. Is that a forecast? Is that the idea?
Sounds like it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I would say no.
Okay, David?
Nope.
Jack?
I don't know. Yeah, my guess is no, but I have no idea. Jeff Bezos.
I think just a clear thing is Amazon is learning a lot. They're moving fast. They're testing and innovating in ways that everyone else can look at, but they still have a long ways to go to compete in the fresh side of the business. And that's where the treasures are. So, time will only tell.
And
one great question just came in. I saw about a small co-op of shoppers.
Yep.
There's definitely room in this space for smaller grocers, independents, especially if you're in a co-op. There's power in numbers. There's a lot of technologies that can be shared in economies of scale. It's certainly not a place to be afraid of. But we're at a point now in the industry where we can help the very largest all the way down to the single proprietor.
All right. Well, that wraps up the Q&A section. Thank you, Bill, David, and Jack for a great presentation. Very informative. And everyone, please stay safe and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.